Yeah.
How many Scaramucci's do we have left in this bear market?
Oh, that's a good question. So, unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers lasted 150, 1,084th Scaramucci's. He lasted 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I only lasted 11 days in the White House. So I was watching Monday Night Football. I had to do the calculation quickly. But you can check the math. I'm telling you, the math is right on that. So, but I think, and I'm obviously been wrong about everything. So, but I do think that the halving cycle is going to be a big deal, and the combination of that plus the ETF is a big deal. And since you asked me to break a little bit of news here, I'll break a little bit of news. When BlackRock set up their ETF, they set it up in a trust format, and then they're going to convert it from a trust format into an ETF.
Yep.
So the first outside investor was Skybridge, because we wanted to be in there having a message. Of course, our ETF last year got rejected. I think it was in March of 2022. And you know this, Ryan, because you know how arbitrary and capricious our SEC is. Our application was literally identical to the applications that are about to be approved, because now they almost have a judicial requirement to be approved.
Yep.
But I think that's going to be the seminal event for us. I think people will look back and say Bitcoin going from 900 coins coming out of the network a day to 450, plus the largest asset manager in the world getting in the mix, of course, alongside ARK and Fidelity and others. And, you know, I'm a Wall Street guy, so you can love or hate me for that. But I can tell you something about Wall Street. Wall Street is a selling organization. And when I joined Wall Street at Goldman Sachs 35 years ago, they told me that products are sold, they're not bought. And you go out into the marketplace and you make a compelling case for the product and you sell the product to the customer. And so I just want everybody in this room to imagine legions of salespeople and legions of financial consultants selling Bitcoin to their investors. And so I'll make a few predictions. I believe it'll end up in the $2 trillion model portfolio at BlackRock. So you could do the math on what that would look like, even if it was a 1% allocation. It will end up in the 401k plans of people that are at Fidelity. Skybridge is one of the pilot companies at Fidelity. I think we were one of the first 10 companies to adopt the Fidelity 401k plan that allows you to buy up to 5% in Bitcoin. And of course, that's going to spread out now to Ethereum and other products. And you and I both know, if you look at the macro dynamic, if Bitcoin moves up, the big daddy, it'll push the other altcoins up. It'll create more capital in the marketplace for the newer coins as well. So
you do not think that the ETF news is priced in, right? We've had a lot of these like sell the news events historically.
Well, again,
but you have a unique perspective because you have spent time in.
Okay, so let me just give, again, perspective. You know, this is more technical perspective and trading markets for 35 years. It could be priced in the short term. Remember when Google went public in 2004, it dropped by about 7%, and you could buy all the Google available in the world. It's only up like 1,000x from there. But the point being is that technically these things could roll. When Facebook went public, as it was maybe, I don't know, 07 or 08, it rolled on the public offering, and you could have people selling, and there's pressure from people who are long-term holders of Bitcoin that sort of feel burned from the 69 move to 16 up to 26. Yeah. They may capitulate and start selling, but they're missing, in my opinion, the overwhelming production activity of Wall Street. And so, you know, a year or two from now, from the date that BlackRock gets that ETF passed or approved, they'll look back and say, wow, why was I selling into that? That was short-termism. The right thing to do here is to hold this stuff because it's got a finite supply. The supply is being cut by half, let's call it April of next year.
Yep.
And a result of which, if I hold this thing, it's going to be a very valuable asset. And then we're not even getting into the whole macro discussion about what's going on with the U.S. dollar, the $33 trillion of debt that we have, which could be, and this sounds crazy, it could be $34 trillion by January. You know, they're just running wild with the debt, and there's nobody in Washington that's talking about anything responsible related to our spending.
Yeah. Well, higher for longer when it comes to inflation, right? We're going to have a conversation tomorrow with Raoul Powell, and I think that he and I, and maybe some others, maybe yourself included, think that we're going to have to print more money again just to refinance the debt, and there's a lot of tailwinds that still exist for Bitcoin, which might be the most boring asset that, we just had a couple of good panels, good presentation from Sammy on the state of Bitcoin, but sometimes you don't have to do a whole heck of a lot. You just need to do one thing really well, and in Bitcoin's case, it's got this kind of staying power, and now all of this institutional support that's kind of developing around it. So, you, in addition to being a longtime Wall Street veteran, you run the SALT conference, so you're used to conferences like this, except kind of the TradFi community.
It's an amazing event. Congratulations.
And you were super supportive as we talked about ways to work together too. We had I think you were our top affiliate, top referrer, just in terms of the overlap. So we'll do more together. But
I appreciate that. But you've done an amazing job, and you do an amazing job every year.
But I think what I always try to do whenever we're putting an agenda together or writing a research report or whatever the conversation is, try not to overthink things. And in some case, you brought up the halving coming up next year. A lot of us in the room, like we've been to a few halvings, we're like, this is voodoo. I don't think that this is actually, going to have like much of an impact. It's, the marginal difference is much lower than it was in cycles past. You think that narrative still has staying power, juxtaposed with all of the other kind of tailwinds that are kind of coming together at the same time. And people start talking about it, so it kind of becomes its own reality.
All right, so let me address it in three ways, okay? Yeah. And we'll give a little bit of a historical framework. So 52 years ago, the United States took itself off the gold standard. We could not pay the debt associated with the Vietnam War unless we monetized that debt, printed more money to pay it. And so we were $35 an ounce 52 years ago. We're $2,000 an ounce today, roughly. And that means that the purchasing power equivalent is two $1972 are worth $2,023. Just to give you a sense for purchasing power dynamics. And ladies and gentlemen, this absolutely crushed the working middle class. Okay, so my dad, who was a laborer, was a crane operator for 42 years, his real wages, if we price them today, they're down 26.5%. So the Scaramuccis go from a small house, living an aspirational blue-collar experience in America to an economically desperational one as a result of the decisions that we made to devalue the dollar to monetize our debt. And that is going up now exponentially. So you have that macro factor. And that is very distressful to the middle class, and they are losing their living standards. The second macro factor is what I just said. You have tens of thousands of people that will now be selling Bitcoin, and you don't have to be a Nash game theory expert to understand that every Wall Street firm will have a Bitcoin ETF in their arsenal. So if I go to Ryan and I say, hey, you just sold your business for $1 billion, and I want you to $2 billion, and you want me to, I'd like to run your money. And he says to me, well, what's your digital asset strategy or your digital property strategy? And I say, oh, geez, I don't have one. Jamie Dimon told me it was a Ponzi scheme or it was a pet rock. He's going to the next guy. So every single Wall Street firm is going to have that in their arsenal. And I'm going to tell you something. When Wall Street has something in their arsenal, they sell it to their clients. Okay, so you have to just understand that. Okay. And then the third thing is going from 900 to 450 because you're OG in the industry.
Hey, Marcia, nice to meet you.
Is not, for me, or a institutional Wall Streeter. That's a monumental collapse in supply. And so I'm going to tell you right now, those guys are already buying in advance and in anticipation of this.
It's interesting because we have so many ETFs coming out all at the same time. Obviously, you're invested in the BlackRock Trust. I think that there's not too many people in this room that are bearish on BlackRock's ability to get an ETF approved. Maybe not in this administration, but basically as soon as there's a changing of the guard at the SEC. What do you think the dynamics look like of the ETF market? And do you have any thoughts on how market structure is going to change when you take this whole family of ETFs, right? If 10 get approved at the same time. what, if any, impact that's going to have on the end spot markets as these big institutional players start jockeying, not only for kind of the race to be first out, but to your point, Wall Street is a selling machine. They're all selling at the same time, which means that they're probably accumulating. And where do you think that the flows go, or does BlackRock just run away with it?
Well, I mean, obviously, listen, Coinbase is going to capture a lot of that flow, but I do predict that the Wall Street exchanges, the old school exchanges like the CME, the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, are going to request the ability to buy and sell digital properties, including Bitcoin. And so the market is going to widen. And again, because I'm a little older in the business, I guess I'm senior now in the business, I can just tell you that when we were trading NASDAQ, we used to call it OTC at Goldman Sachs in the 1980s. That was over the counter. That meant that there was no clearing mechanism in the exchange. And so we were selling securities to each other over the counter. There were dollar spreads in those stocks. Now you can trade those very same stocks today for literally no charge.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen is the demand is there, the price is going to get pushed up, and it's going to force a ton more exchanges into the mix. And again, as wealth is created in the society, a portion of that wealth is going to get chipped off for digital properties, digital assets, and most likely Bitcoin, because it's the oldest, and I think people view it as the sturdiest. But again, if you have a $500 billion market for Bitcoin, and gold is a $12 trillion market. And I'm going to make the case that Bitcoin is better than gold. One of my Saudi friends said to me once, and I put this in my book, The Sweet Life of Bitcoin, Understanding Bitcoin. I have a Saudi investor. I was in Saudi Arabia, and he turned to me and he said, I hear you say Bitcoin is better than gold on television. I said, yes, I believe it is, Sheikh. He said, well, let me give you some more facts. He says, I have a USB with $200 million of Bitcoin on it. He says, right now, MBS, he loves me. There's nothing going to happen to me. But if he stops loving me, guess where this is going? This is going where the sun doesn't shine, and I'm heading for the Yemeni border. You can't do that with $200 million of gold. You can't carry $200 million of gold across the border. And when you stop and think about it that simplistically, and you think about the next generation, there are people in this room in their 20s. Well, in 10 years, they'll be in their 30s. And believe it or not, before you know it, you'll be in your 40s. And you will be mainstreaming Bitcoin the way my generation mainstreamed the internet.
Yep.
And right now, you're roughly at a 4% saturation. That would put you at 1998 for the internet. And so the next 10 to 15 years are remarkably bullish. It's just, you have to get through the short-term sentiment. You have to get through the headwinds, the negativity, the Gary Genslers. I mean, but let's face it, if you look like Jiminy Cricket come to real life, you'd probably be taking it out on the rest of us as well. You know what I mean? So you just have to just accept people are bringing their personal baggage sometimes into their political views.
Tell me how you really feel. I mean, that's why we get along.
You're my favorite Twitter follow. I have to be honest. I mean, I go on Twitter at night before I go to bed. I look through the thing. I'm like, I got to look at Ryan's Twitter account because he's saying publicly exactly what I'm feeling and thinking. So that's why you get so many retweets from me.
I think my PR team is even more scared now than they were a couple minutes ago. But
that's all right. You're going to be fine. You lost your hair before the fight started. But if we had known each other earlier, I could have helped you with that. Actually, I know all the tricks.
Yeah, you know what, man? I missed the boat, but we've got the balds and the hairs. This week
well,
we got Novo here, we got Brian Armstrong, we had Jeremy this morning. So I'm in good company.
I sort of feel like the bald people do better than the hirsute people. So you're doing just fine.
Anthony, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm curious. You have a little bit of experience in politics.
Yeah.
What do you think you would advise to people that are just starting to get out? I mean, I've been banging this drum for the last couple of years about needing to spend more time down in D.C., entrepreneurs needing to engage a little bit more, spend time with your elected representatives. We've got a few folks here this week. You've learned a lot in a short amount of time, but also kind of the long arc of like SALT and just being well networked with folks in that sphere. What are some of your recommendations for how you can stay kind of authentic, colorful, but also really get along and have an impact to the point that you're going to influence outcomes in DC?
So I would say 3 quick things, and then we'll walk off. But the first thing I would say is you have to get involved, particularly if you live in the state of New York and you're a high-income earner. Right now, I'm a minority partner in my own life. And so if $1 comes into my W-2, 52 cents goes to my majority partners, which are Joe Biden, Kathy Hochul, and Eric Adams. Okay, so they control the thing. I'm a minority partner. And so you have to get involved in the hiring decisions, and you have to try to get involved. And so whether you like the people, you don't like the people, you have a cynical view of politics, you have to get yourself involved. Number 2, stand for something, because you will find that if you pick a side and you stand for something and you're principled, you get a lot of respect from the other side. Even if they're bashing you on Twitter, you get a lot of respect from the other side. You know, I have a view of the Chinese-U.S. relationship that is not in favor right now in Washington. That's one of the few things that they agree on in Washington is we're all mad at China and let's make them our Cold War, next Cold War adversary. I think that's a terrible idea. I think it's a very bad idea for the United States, and it's against our long-term interests. And I can't tell you the number of people that have called me that publicly say one thing, and then they're on the phone with me saying, hey, I appreciate someone else saying that.
Yep.
So you want to stay
I have
principled.
a lot of those messages.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to stay principled, and you want to pick a side. When Hillary Clinton went to Chicago, and she put the Chicago Cub hat on, and then she was in New York, she put the Yankee hat on, no bueno for Hillary Clinton, because now she looks like a weather vane, right? So you want to pick a side and stick to it. And then the third thing, which I think is super important, is I just gave you the percentage of my income that goes to the government, but let me just tell you what they're doing, okay? They are borrowing 43 cents on every dollar that they're spending. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's unfunded tax liabilities. Everybody understand that? You are going to get that through inflation, which is a silent universal tax. You're going to get that through eventual taxation, okay, or just flat out monetization of debt. And so it should get you conditioned to see if you get involved and put an end to that sort of nonsense. I know we have to go, but I want to thank you.
This is the guy who runs conferences. We just went down from 1 to 0, and you could tell.
We got to go. But I want to thank you for putting this on, give me the opportunity to speak. And if you got your Bitcoin, I wouldn't be selling your Bitcoin here. Yeah. You've been through the winter, and the winter's coming to an end.
Well, at these events, we're usually ships passing in the night. It's good to finally do it on stage together.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anthony Scaramucci.
Thank you. Appreciate being here. Thank you.